I look forward to this morning's conversation, and I know you will as well. But before we get into all of that, guys, I'm going to give you your news in 90 seconds. So, on Wednesday, the 7th of June, 2023, two divisions under the THA were present at the 19th meeting of the Joint Select Committee on Local Authorities, Service Commissions, and Statutory Authorities, including the THA, the Division of Finance, Trade and the Economy, and Tourism, Culture, Antiquities, and Transportation. The primary aim of this follow-up meeting was to evaluate the progress made by the THA in implementing the recommendations in the report of the 16th meeting of the JSC from 2016. The Division of Finance, Trade and the Economy presented on the impact of COVID on the economy, strategies for post-COVID recovery, revenue generation, and attracting foreign direct investment. The Division of Tourism presented on two major events on the island, the Tobago Jazz Experience and the October Carnival, as it relates to arrivals and airlifts. Based on the responses from the representatives of the two divisions, both events seem to have suffered sufficient deficit. Additionally, both divisions appeared to be unprepared for the meeting, and this was further compounded by the absence of senior officials of the Tobago Tourism Agency. And finally, in a Facebook post from the minority leader, Kelvin Morris, I quote, "So you all have no problem spending the big bucks, but at the same time, you all don't want to answer the people of Trinidad and Tobago," end quote. In an exclusive interview from Tobago Updates, Senator Laurence Hislop said the division lacks overall managerial direction and accountability. At the JSC, the Division of Finance stated accounting records are mostly manual and that the Assembly will start digitalizing those records this fiscal year with the Executive Council minutes and the Hansard reports of the Assembly legislature. Additionally, an update on non-tourism foreign investment projects on the island, including a potential strawberry farm, was mentioned. And that was your news in 90 seconds. So guys, if you realize that in the news this morning, most of the conversation is surrounding that Joint Select Committee sitting that took place on June the 7th, where the THA presented before that committee to give their reports. And as the news story would have stated, we had the Division of Trade, Finance, Trade and the Economy, as well as the Division of Tourism, Culture and Antiquities there. Now, for those of you who do not necessarily understand what that JSC sitting is about and why it's important, we're going to get into that conversation this morning. And to have that conversation with me, I have Mr. Laurence Hislop, who's Senator Laurence Hislop, and he's here with us this morning, and we're going to be discussing that in detail. He's going to give us a lot of background as he also sits on that Joint Select Committee. And on the side of the Division of Finance, Trade and the Economy, I have sitting with me this morning Mr. Anslem Richards, who is well-known to Tobago in regards to being an economist, many times a political strategist and analyst, but also a chief advisor in the Assembly. And we are happy and excited to have you guys here this morning. And I know that you guys noticed that we have basically two sides of the coin. So this is going to be an extremely interesting conversation. But before I start off with the conversation this morning, I just want to applaud you guys for agreeing to sit together this morning. It shows a level of political maturity and the fact that Tobago's development is first and foremost of paramount importance outside of the politics itself. Mr. Richards, you have always maintained great relationships with members on the other side, the PNM, which is quite admirable. And Mr. Hislop, you have shown your own maturity this morning by agreeing to have Mr. Richards accompany you on set this morning. So we look forward to this conversation. But as we start off, I want to give you, Mr. Hislop, the opportunity to really explain to Tobagonians, even from the grassroots level, what this JSC sitting was about and its importance, so that the regular, average, everyday Joe could have an understanding of what exactly was this JSC sitting about.
Morning, Tobago. Morning, Shenell. Morning, Mr. Richards. It's indeed good to be here. As always, it's my first time being on set with you, Shenell. And so I look forward to the discussion this morning. The Joint Select Committee system of the Parliament is set up as a watchdog for the government of the day. You have the separation, well, we know the separation of, quote-unquote, separation of powers, where you have the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. The legislature plays a significant role in its oversight of the governance structure in Trinidad and Tobago. And part of that oversight is the Joint Select Committee process. There are several committees that make up that system within the Parliament. And this specific committee that I'm on, the one on local authorities, statutory bodies, including the THA, is just one of the committees that I sit on as a member. The committee's responsibility is oversight. So you will notice that the committee is comprised of both opposition and government members, as well as independent senators. The chairman of the committee is an independent senator. And so that gives us a broad remit in terms of the oversight. This committee has specific responsibilities for your statutory bodies, your local authorities, your service commissions, including the Tobago House of Assembly. So what happened on Wednesday is part of the operations of the Parliament, where entities or government ministries are asked to come before the committee and to, I don't like to use the word interrogated, but you are questioned based on what transpires within the specific ministry. In this regard, the committee chose to it was a follow-up session or a follow-up sitting. Initially, this was done in, I think it was 2016. So it was done in 2016. There were some recommendations that came out of that. And from that, the committee decided to have a follow-up interrogation of these two entities.
And for my own clarity and the clarity of viewers watching, was this session specific to the management and the running of the organization, or was it specific to finances or the financial management?
So I'll give you what the committee said. This is a follow-up examination on the second report of the committee in the 11th Parliament 2015 to 2020 on an inquiry into certain aspects of the administration of the Tobago House of Assembly. So there was a report that was laid from the initial meeting in 2016. Mm-hmm. And so what the committee is seeking to do is to see where the THA was in regards to where it is now versus where it was in 2016.
In regards to the recommendations that were made.
That's right. In regards to the recommendations that were given to the Tobago House of Assembly.
Right. And in understanding the role of the JSC and the committee and the sitting that took place on the 7th, give us a little bit of perspective from the THA angle going into this meeting and the type of preparation that it took to sit before the committee.
Well, let me say good morning to Tobago, and thank you, Brother Hislop, for agreeing to this joint sitting of the Tobago Joint Select Committee this morning. And I just want to segue by getting into something that Mr. Hislop said. He said the Joint Select Committee is set up to exercise oversight over the government of the day. We must understand in this country that we have two governments. Two governments. We have the national government, and we have the national parliament, which is the national legislature, and we have the island government of Tobago, with the legislature in Tobago, which is the Tobago House Assembly. So we have to, and this is an issue that we need to, and I have advised the Chief Secretary to get a legal opinion as to whether this JSC issue should extend to the deputies extending into the operation of the THA, given the fact that we are already by section 46 of the THA Constitution, the examination of the THA's accounts and operation is subject to the scrutiny of the Auditor General Office as provided for in Section 46 of the THA Act, which is Section 16 of the Constitution. So we are being scrutinized at the THA at that level so that the Auditor General come in and look into the operation of the THA. And then we have the JSC, which I think is a misplaced issue, coming into the THA down to the level of a division and asking the division how much ticket they sold for jazz. But that is another issue. And Mr. Hislop will clear up some of these issues as we go forward, I hope. So that is something Tobago needs to have a conversation on, whether the JSC at this micro level has jurisdiction in looking that deep, or whether we should be called before our legislator up in Scarborough there and drill down and let Mr. Morris and his team and the team from the assembly get into these micro issues in the operation of the people's business in Tobago. That's one consideration that we need to give to this whole proceeding. And that is probably a higher conversation for us and the national government. The other thing is that Mr. Hislop needs to explain further the procedures of the Joint Select Committee. Because what happens is that Mr. Hislop Committee would have sent a body of questions, including the recommendation he spoke of, and saying, we want you to submit a written submission in response to these recommendations where you are and these new questions so that we can get a better sighting of where the THA is on these matters. We would have prepared those submissions. I was part of the team that prepared the submission on behalf of the Division of Finance. I also interface with the division team in preparation at tourism. And I have the questions here. These questions were sent, we provide significant response. The appearance, as far as I understand and my research has shown me, the appearance of the witnesses, the THA officials, before the committee is to facilitate any clarity that may emanate from the committee in relation to your written submission, and to advance the whole principle of full disclosure. Here is this. You appear before a committee that told you you are coming to answer these questions in your trial on murder. And when you appear, Mr. Hislop and the committee want to charge you on fraud, try you on fraud, asking you why you sleep out with the woman last night, why you this, what color shirt you're wearing. You don't run, you are breaching your own rules. Because you set the rules, you know, and when we apply the rules and appear, you come with a parallel inquiry to what you said you're going to try your son.
Okay. However, Mr. Richard, that's your interpretation of their role and their function. But Mr. Hislop himself is here this morning, so he can offer clarity.
But that's the rules.
On the criteria for oversight that his committee works on. So let's get into that.
First and foremost, no entities on trial before a joint select committee.
Well,
Well, you did say interrogation.
Yeah,
right. So
okay, fine. We interrogate the information.
Okay. Call it where it was.
And so
I just use that as a hypothetical.
We're having a discussion. That's the reason I came here this morning.
Yeah.
I said very clearly I don't want to come here for a debate. We come in to discuss what was happening. The initial questions, and I'll treat it a couple of things. The initial questions that the
Let's
committee...
start off with the criteria, and then we get down into the
No,
questions.
so it's the committees have a broad remit.
Okay.
The committees are set to treat with... Okay, for example, I'm on another committee called the PAAC, which treats with almost every aspect of the governance system. You have the Public Accounts Committee that treats with the Auditor General's report, because Mr. Richards alluded to the Auditor General's report. The Auditor General's report is laid in Parliament. So it becomes... So what we have to understand is that the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago has complete oversight, because where do you come for your financial allocations every year? It is passed in the national budget. You sit in a finance committee that goes through the allocations line by line. Now, the finance committee is made up of the entire House of Representatives, and it is gone through line by line as to what ministry, what entity gets what allocation. When that allocation is given to the respective ministries, there is a responsibility for the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago to account to the people of Trinidad and Tobago where their monies are going and what it is doing. And so when the Auditor General drills down into Tobago's finances and the management of the finances, and that is laid in Parliament, which now becomes public record, the Public Accounts Committee could now interrogate that information from the Auditor General. You have the other committees of the Parliament that deal with not only financial operations of various entities, but also the management. The Ministry of Sport came before PAAC, and we were treating with public pools and the management of public pools throughout Trinidad, right? And so the committees have their remit and their responsibility, not to the entities, their responsibility are to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. The second thing, according to the law, there is no government of Tobago. There's a Tobago House of Assembly that deals with the administrative governance of the island. But when you want to talk about the Parliament does not have jurisdiction over the Tobago House of Assembly, where does the Tobago House of Assembly subvention come from? It comes from the Parliament. You see, when the autonomy bills were laid, which would have given, so the same committee system that we have at the Parliament is some of the same committee systems that would have been built out at the Tobago House or the Tobago Legislature when Tobago would have been called the Tobago Island Government. Those same oversight committees or similar oversight committees would have been set up to interrogate more into the operations of the Tobago House of Assembly. The second thing, the questions, or the third thing, the questions are given as a guide for the sitting. But coming out of those questions, based on how the conversations go in the sitting, additional information can be sought. And the committees throughout the Parliament have never had an issue with entities saying to them, we will forward this to you in writing. The committees have never had an issue because the questions that are sent to the entities, the submission papers that are requested, because the questions are built off of the information that comes to the committee. So the committee sends, say, we would like to meet with you. These are the criteria that we want. You send in a submission document, and the questions, what we call the issues papers, are built out of that.
Okay. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back and we'll continue on with this conversation and we get more clarity on that and we allow for response by Mr. Richards. Guys, see you soon right after this. Good morning and welcome back to Good Morning Tobago. If you're just joining us, guys, we're having a very interesting conversation regarding that JSC sitting that took place earlier this week on the 7th of June. And so before we left off for the break, we had Senator Hislop who was really explaining to us the remit of the committee about in regards to some of the questions that were asked and how that is structured. Now, before we got into that, Mr. Richards would have asked him to explicitly highlight the procedure or the boundaries within which these questions are asked, and he would have stated that out of the issue paper is where most of the questions are presented. Now, Mr. Richards, I want to find out from you, because you said that your interpretation was that you are coming to the committee to further explain the submissions that were made in writing. When you guys were contacted to sit before the JSC, was that explicitly explained to you, or was it made clear?
And Mr. Hislop has confirmed that in his presentation without realizing, because he's saying that the question that they should ask should emanate from the issue papers. That is the question they would have sent. The submissions, right? The submissions, right? As follow-up to bring, and that is what I said, to bring further clarity in advancing the whole principle of full disclosure. But I want to return to a point that Mr. Hislop made, to say that there is no island government. But Mr. Hislop and others could define this thing as they want. But what I understand, and Mr. Hislop, Prime Minister, would have said it on numerous occasions, that this country is being managed and run by two executives, the Cabinet and the Executive Council. So the government of Trinidad produces the executive in the form of the Cabinet, and the government of Tobago provides the executive in the form of the Executive Council. Mr. Hislop and others could define it how it wants. That is what obtains, that is how the country is structured, that is how it's run. And behind the government of the national government, the Cabinet, you have the legislature, which is the Parliament, that sets up these joint committee. Then in the Tobago, we have the Tobago Assembly, which is our legislature. I am asking, and my simple question was, whether this level of inquiry is well placed or misplaced. Whether we should be having that in Tobago with our legislators asking our public servants how you spend your money, how much ticket you print for jazz, how much you sell, or whether we want an entity that resides on another government structure to have that kind of overreach. That's all I'm saying, whether that is well placed, and I think this is a matter that needs some kind of constitutional interpretation. That's my position. Mr. Hislop is free to disagree. Let me turn back now to the actual operations of the Joint Select Committee.
And what was requested when they asked
so,
you to present?
So they sent questions, and the recommendation out of the 2016 hearing that they had. We responded in full details, right? And as I said before, we appeared to provide further clarity on those things that they say we want answers to. That is what the committee did. We appeared. Then we have a whole new parallel inquiry, asking for all kinds of information. Because, for instance, if Mr. Hislop was interested in visitors' arrival to the island, that should have been one of the inquiring questions. It's not that the data was not available, as the observers would have seen. At the end of the day, the witnesses from tourism was able to call, and the data was provided. But they never indicated in their request, in their setup for this inquiry, that they were interested in these kinds of information. So obviously, or apparently, the team from tourism did not work with the data set. I had it on my computer. And that's why I told the committee that the data is available, but it will be a little challenge to pull it up. The data is information. But you called us to this inquiry, explaining in writing that these are the things we want to examine you on. Submit your written responses. We did that. We appeared. But you're asking everybody's cell phone. You're asking everybody computer. You're asking everybody. And then when you don't get the answers you're looking for, you said you are disappointed that the THA cannot answer these simple questions. And where is the discipline at the level of the committee in carrying out its responsibility to the people of Trinidad and Tobago? Or is it intended to create public misinformation and mischief? I don't know.
Okay. However, a number of the questions were surrounding how were the services procured and the arrival numbers to Tobago. And we would hope that members of the Division of Tourism would readily have this information at their disposal because of the level of work that they are doing. So regardless to the fact that some of the questions may not have been sent before, don't you think that it is imperative for individuals at that level of the assembly to understand the intricacies of the festivals that they are running and spending this level of money to manage on the island?
And I'm not disagreeing with that, but I'm saying if you send and call me and tell me you want to examine me on bananas, and I wrote up my whole thesis on banana and come to defend it, and you are questioning me now on lettuce. Although I may have information on lettuce, I have not shown up prepared to discuss lettuce with you.
I understand, but given the nature of their job, a number of these things should be basic for them to be able to respond to.
And I'm saying, who walks around with the arrival numbers in their heads to say is 10,000? Come on, let's be fair.
Mr. Hislop, talk to us about the deviation from some of the main questions that were submitted. And what was the reasoning behind this, or what would have led the committee to ask a number of questions that were not presented prior to the sitting.
No, as I said before, the initial questions that are sent to any ministry, any division, any entity are guides. That's what they are.
Okay.
What we have, you see, I don't understand what the challenge is with, and I want to make it abundantly clear. Mr. Richards keeps saying that if Mr. Hislop wanted the information, when I sit on a joint select committee, I sit as a member of the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago with a responsibility to the people. We have been advised over and over again. Do not allow the committees to become political. And I think that's the reason why you don't see the members introducing themselves as government senator or opposition MP. Although I heard my colleague from the opposition bench for the first time introduce herself as an opposition member of parliament. Because that's not something that we do. We usually just say Laurence Hislop member. Because you see, and there's another reason too. You notice that if you look throughout all joint select committees, ministers are hardly ever asked to come to a committee. The persons who face a joint select committee are usually the technocrats of the ministries and the divisions. And so when you say to us that basic information in tourism as arrival numbers, even if that was not one of the original questions, that's basic information. You're dealing with the division of tourism. Your your clients are visitors to the island. And so basic information as to what your arrival numbers are, that's a no-brainer where a question is concerned. And yes, I understand that information was not available. And we may argue that it should have been because it's basic information. But as I've shared before, the committees have never had a challenge with ministries saying to us, we don't have that information right now. Could we provide it? Because I really have a challenge with the complaints. Because so many other ministries have come before committees on a regular basis. And government ministers who are on the committees, drill ministries.
Right.
Drill them as if it is not their government in office. Because
Right.
you see, you're not drilling a politician, you're drilling a technocrat who is supposed to be fully aware of his or her role and responsibility. And so, as I said, the questions are a guide. And the chairman of the committee, at any point in time, can ask a question based on the ministry or the entity that is before us. It is up to the entity to say, Mr. Chairman, we don't have that information. Could we kindly provide that in writing at a later stage? Okay. And I invite the public to go and view. You see, this issue came up to be a big thing because it's the THA that is being interrogated.
All right.
You know, there were about
I really like to say Hislop. Let me tell you why.
about 4 committees meeting.
I'd love for you to respond, Mr. Richards, but we desperately need to take a break, especially the fact that you said the committee has no problem with them responding later on.
Okay, good.
Because a statement was made that you were extremely disappointed.
We were disappointed because because it's basic information. You are contradicting.
But
you're saying that the committee over the years had no challenge with people saying if the information is an adjacent request to the information that was asked for in the original submission, you have no problem with it. But when you and the committee, including your chairman, is in the middle of the inquiry saying we are disappointed.
Because what we were disappointed on was
take a break right here and we will come back right
if you are saying that it is a norm for that, why you are so disappointed?
Arrival.
Rise up to a brand new dawn. Tobago updates. Good morning, Tobago. Wake up.
Right, good morning again, and welcome back to Good Morning Tobago right here on Tobago Updates. And as I have said this morning, we're having really interesting conversations as I sit with Senator Laurence Hislop and Mr. Anslem Richards. And we have been chatting a lot about that JSC sitting that took place on the 7th of June, where the THA was asked to come and account for a number of things, including some of the festivals that have been taking place and some of the post-COVID recovery strategies at the Division of Finance, Trade and the Economy. And before we went to a break, I would have asked Senator Hislop to clarify a bit for us why he would have stated that there's no problem in entities coming before the committee and stating that they will provide the information at a later date or in writing. However, they also indicated at the end of the sitting that they were disappointed. So we just asked him to offer some clarity in that. Was it okay or was it disappointing, Senator Hislop?
So if you recognize the areas that, or the area that all three members who said they were disappointed in was the basic information about arrival numbers. That is what we were disappointed in. And if you go back to the tape, you'd recognize that member Maurice Julian said that, I said that, and the chairman said that. So it's not that we contradicting ourselves in stating that you can provide information at a later date. But usually when that is allowed or that is requested is when it is very detailed information about a specific issue. And so the detailed information may not be available at the point in time to the technocrat or the official of the ministry. And so the official says, we would like to provide that in writing. But what we're saying is that when you are the Division of Tourism, and I heard it somewhere on the airwaves this morning as well, you are the Division of Tourism. Your as I said, your clients are visitors to the island. Tobago is the product. And so a basic thing as how many people came to your island between a particular period of time, is something that you should have, if not on your fingertips, but in a document. You come in before a joint select committee and you are to expect questions, wide-ranging questions about the entity that you represent. And so that is what we were disappointed in. We recognize, especially the Division of Tourism was not fully prepared for the joint select committee. And let's not try and downplay it and make it seem as if the JSC was on a witch hunt. The joint select committees are not on witch hunts. I sit on the PAAC that is chaired by Madam Speaker. And when you hear how Madam Speaker deals with ministries and other government ministers deal with ministries, why do divisions in the THA, why are we, and I shouldn't say the divisions, but why are people offended by the way the JSC was doing its job? That's the responsibility of the JSC. I said on another platform that the chamber, the plenary is in the House of Commons, they call it theatre. Because there's a lot of politicking that takes place sometimes in the chamber. But when you come to the joint select committee system in the parliament, that's where you get the information, There's information that will come out in a JSC that will never come out in a sitting. Because you get to bring the technocrats before you who have a responsibility to answer to the people of Trinidad and Tobago.
All right.
And that's what we say.
And Mr. Richards, I want to come to you in relation to the preparedness of the assembly when sitting before the JSC.
Right. So, and I went through this over and over, and I really like Mr. Hislop, and Mr. Hislop had to either be a fish or a fowl, because he can't come and tell us that the committee is not normally disappointed or offended when ministries or people appearing before it say they will provide the information to adjacent question to the written submission at a later time, right? But when it happens to the THA, or in the case of the THA, Mr. Hislop, Ms. Julian and the chairman stating their public disappointment. And if you look at the tape, you will see at the end, the data that they had asked for was being provided by Corris Nancis, a member of the team. Because and it was said early that the information is available. However, we don't have it here because that was not one of the questions ask. So apparently, the team did not have the data readily before them, but they did indicate it in their response that the information is available. We will provide it later. However, during the sitting, the team was able to mobilize and get the data, and the data was actually presented. But yet, Mr. Hislop didn't even withdraw his disappointment. The chairman didn't see it fit to withdraw his disappointment. And the lady who keeps saying it's a simple question, she didn't see it simply important to withdraw her disappointment when the actual information was provided. The information was available. But if we have to conduct a very disciplined inquiry by the JSC, and you give us a body of questions, and you ask us to provide written submission, we complied with that. You had a whole host of adjacent questions that you came up, that some of them was not even in alignment with what you asked. And when I listen to you, Mr. Hislop, and when the witness say, we don't have the information readily available, we are going to submit in writing, then the big face of disappointment is presented in the public space to give the impression, to give the calculated impression that the THA don't know what it's doing, and the Joint Select Committee is so disappointed. No, let us be fair. You can't call me to ask me about corn and question me about cucumbers. It's just not fair. That is an ambush.
In addition to that, Mr. Richards, there was a clear indication that a number of officials that we would have expected to see at the table was not there. No one from the Tobago Tourism Agency Limited.
Yeah, there were persons from the Tourism Agency Limited.
Okay, well, I'm guessing they were expecting to see the chairman of the company.
Well, I can't speak to that.
Speak to the absence of...
I can't speak to that. That would have to be answered by the line secretary who have oversight, executive oversight over that company.
Okay, no problem.
Can't speak to that.
Mr. Hislop, you would have also raised the dissatisfaction in the absence of those the chairman of the Tobago Tourism Agency Limited being at the sitting as well. However, you also stated that most of the times you only have technical persons at the sitting. So was it an issue that the chairman wasn't there, seeing that the other technocrats were present at the meeting?
Usually the officials, of senior officials, so let's say, for instance, if a ministry is to come before a Joint Select Committee, there's a permanent secretary, the deputy PS, along with senior officials of various entities under that ministry. So if we treat in with a particular state company under a ministry, somebody from the board has to be there or should be there, because those are the persons who are accountable to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And I want to go back to the point that is the committees are never on a witch hunt, and that's why the committees are comprised the way they're comprised. And in most regards, it is an opposition senator or opposition member who's a chairman, an independent senator is a chairman, and they're comprised in such a way that there isn't this feeling that there is you're ganging up on a ministry or you're ganging up on an entity. This is not the first time that the THA has come to a Joint Select Committee, and persons can go back on the record of the Parliament and see the level of interrogation that took place prior to this present administration being in office in Tobago. And so the Parliament has a function, Parliament has a role, until such time as the law changes that the THA has committees or whatever to regulate itself in terms of the expenditure, in terms of the operations of entities. It is still the responsibility of the Parliament who approves the financial subvention to the Tobago House of Assembly. And hence the reason you have the committees, because it is the Parliament's responsibility to approve financial allocations to ministries. And so if it is the Parliament's responsibility to approve, it is also the responsibility of the Parliament to scrutinize how the money is spent.
Okay, and Mr. Hislop, I want to ask...
Because I think we keep spinning on the same we've been spinning it for the last.
I'll come back to you, Mr. Richards, but I want to find out from you. Moving forward, do you see any importance of really clarifying to the THA or any entity the criteria within which they have to come before the Joint Select Committee to fit into, making it really explicitly clear that the expectation is not just that, okay, you come and you answer questions that were sent before, but it can be a wide range of questions regarding the entity that they are representing. Is it important for you to ensure that that clarity is put out there in the future?
That has always been out there. That has and you see, when Mr. Richards say that the questions were not in alignment with the role and function of the committee or what the committee was adjudicating is not true, because some
How is that true?
all those questions or some of the questions and besides the questions on figures in terms of the arrival, if he could share with me some of the other questions that he felt was out of turn from what was requested of the division. And so when a division comes before a committee or a ministry comes before a committee, we have a wide berth with areas that we could touch on.
But if you have to exercise discipline,
but
if you have to ask, no, because if you're talking about wide berth, right, and you're calling to inquire, and you set up the game, you set the markers, the committee sends the parameters and say, this is the parameter of our examination. Submit your written submission. He's there who did that.
What was the parameter that came to you, Mr.
You send the questions. You send the recommendation.
The questions came out of the submissions that you sent.
No.
And so
Hold on. When you were speaking, I did not.
We're having a dialogue with that is concerned.
No. When you were speaking, I listened attentively.
Okay,
I am making my submission now.
Go ahead, my apologies. Go ahead.
Right? So the committee sent a list of questions and say, these are the questions we want you to submit written submission to, right? And these are and come to explain further on these questions. That's a fundamental, because if you go with Mr. Hislop's submission that the committee, and I don't want to cut or place any fetter on the jurisdiction of the committee. The committee's remit is as wide and large and as deep as the national parliament, be it what it may. But the fact of the matter is that if you have to have an inquiry or look into the operation of a company, you can't leave it open, because the company will have to work with its whole storage department, the records department, to dig up for every question you ask. You set the parameters. You say we want answers to A, B, C, D, F, G. Come and sit down to provide any further clarity we will need. But when you come to when the committee shows up, you have a whole different inquiry. And when the witness states that the information to that question is not readily available, you express disappointment. Well, you set up your game.
Mr. Richards, I want to ask you before we move forward. Regardless of that, do you think that moving forward, the THA has a duty to be a bit more prepared when facing the JSC or similar committees to account for the running as well as the finances of the THA?
Shenell, Mr. Hislop, there is no secret in the fact that we have institutional and systemic challenges in the THA. We have seen it from 2020 to 2022. The last administration was unable to get a pass from the Auditor General in the examination of its financial statement. So it speaks to a deep level, a deep-seated problem of institutional and systemic problems in the THA. And yes, we have to fix those things so that when we appear and our public officers appear, they are more organized, they are more readily prepared to engage with Mr. Hislop and his committee. Yes, I will say yes, that's not an issue. But my basic principle here is about being factual, being truthful, and being honest. Because you can't call me to ask me about banana and question me on cucumbers. It is unfair to the witnesses No judicial system. And there's a saying that the national, and Mr. Hislop keeps saying, the national parliament has its work to do. And there's a saying in politics or in governance that the highest court in the land is the national parliament. Mr. Hislop could go there and say anything about me and we can't swim. You know? And if you're coming with that kind of authority, then you have to be honest, you have to be transparent. You can't set up the witnesses of the division of the THA and tell me you want to ask me about bananas and then you come and you question me about cucumbers. That's not fair. And when I say we are not ready, we don't have the information you're asking about cucumbers readily available, we submit it for you in writing. You're saying you're disappointed.
So should I?
And I disappointed.
I just want to read something here, right? I just want to read something. Because up to this point, Mr. Richards has been unable to share with me what other areas that he felt was outside of what was requested, right? So I just want to say something. This is a letter to the chairman of the Joint Select Committee, right? From the acting administrator, Division of Tourism. And it says, dear chairman, written responses to the follow-up examination on the second report of the committee in the 11th Parliament. If these are written responses to a follow-up, right? The committee has the right to pull questions, if that's such an issue now, to pull questions from the original report. The committee can ask questions from the original report that was laid in Parliament because it is a follow-up. And the truth about it is the only question that Mr. Richards seems to have an issue with right now is the one that speaks to the numbers, the arrival numbers. Because some of the questions that are here, are simple. Has the THA observed an increase in the human resource capacity within the Tobago tourism industry? All of these are here. All this entire document is what was sent to the committee by the administrator of the division. And the secretariat of the committee who builds out the questions in the issues paper can pull from the previous report that was laid in the Parliament that is for public consumption. And so when we talk about the remit of the committee has the remit with the division based on what was laid in the House before, because it is a follow-up interrogation.
Excellent, and thank you for your contribution.
And let me just add this before we go, right? So Mr. Hislop is saying, and he said what he said, but here it is, the said committee sent to the Division of Tourism, the Joint Select Committee, additional questions and requests for information. And there is over 30 questions, none of which they asked, none of which included the questions that the committee could not have provided information. So they sent over 30 additional questions. Look at here.
Okay, well, thank you so much for presenting that. Guys, unfortunately, we are out of time for this interview this morning. Very interesting contributions from both the Senator Laurence Hislop and Mr. Anslem. Richards, guys, you are able to make your own assessments from everything that was said here this morning. And if you just join us, I really hope that you are able to go back and watch this from the beginning and get the clarity that is needed. Guys, we're about to take a quick break and we'll be back right after this.
We are beaches, we are rivers, we are melanated one.